Her daughter used to lie in bed at night, listening to the roof leak, and she told herself, if someone would just fix the roof, everything would be different. Nobody fixed the roof. So she left. That was 5 years ago. And then a drifter came up the ridge, a man nobody in the county would hire, a man with a dismissed warrant and rope burns at his wrist. And he fixed the roof. Not because she asked, not because he was paid to, because he was paying attention. And when her daughter finally came back, she stood at the gate, looked at the roofline, and said just 2 words. Good. That was all. That was everything. A house becomes a home the day someone strong enough to leave decides they are strong enough to stay. Build something worth staying for. This channel is where the West comes alive through the stories that never make the history books. If this story found you at exactly the right moment, let me know in the comments. Like it? Share it with someone who needs to hear that. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Thank you for being part of our community.
Have you ever been left high and dry with nothing but another person's trouble for company? That was Clara May Whitlock's world, and that trouble came knocking when the sun was beating down at high noon. It didn't come in the evening when the quiet gets heavy, and it sure didn't come at dawn while a woman is still safe in her dreams. No, it came right in the middle of a mean Colorado summer day, the kind of heat that feels personal. Clara was out back mending a torn grain sack when she heard it. One solid knock, and then another. It was a slow, deliberate sound, the kind that ain't asking for an invitation. She put the sack down, her fingers already finding the worn handle of a knife in her apron. It had been 4 long months since she'd had a visitor. The last one was old Hattie Greer, who came to tell her in that soft way women share hard news, that Jeb Whitlock was alive and well in Pueblo, running his mouth in his bar tab. Clara had thanked her with a jar of plum preserves, bolted the door behind her, and waited. So when this new knock came, slow and sure, Clara May knew better than to ask who was there. She snuck to the front window, pressed herself flat against the wall, and took a peek. Her heart just about stopped. Standing on her porch was the biggest man she had ever laid eyes on. He must have been 6'6", with shoulders so wide they blocked out the sun. His skin was burnt the color of old leather, and his boots were caked in the dust of a long, hard road. A rifle was slung across his back, and he held a sweat-stained brown hat in his hands. He didn't knock a 3rd time. He just stood there, waiting. Clara watched him for a good long minute. He wasn't impatient. He didn't look around, sizing up the place. He never once called out her name. He just waited, holding that hat like a man come to pay a visit he wasn't sure would be welcome. She slipped the knife from her apron and tucked it into the waistband of her skirt, hidden from sight. Then she unlatched the 2 bolts on the door. The hinges cried out, the way everything on that broken-down place cried out. It had all been falling apart for 2 years, ever since Jeb skipped out with their money. The door swung open. Up close, the man seemed even bigger, but he didn't move an inch. He kept his feet planted right where they were. He looked straight at her. His eyes were a steady brown in a face that had seen its share of sun and trouble. His voice was low, meant only for her. "Ma'am," he said, "I have no intention of crossing this threshold without your say-so." Clara blinked. In her 34 years, no man had ever spoken to her with that kind of respect. Not her father, not the boys at the general store, and certainly not Jeb, who had kicked down every door in her life without a second thought. Those words found a place deep inside her and stayed there. A small, sharp laugh escaped her lips, a sound so unfamiliar she barely recognized it as her own. "Well, you're nearly as big as the whole cabin," she said. It was the simple truth. He almost was. The man didn't smile. Instead, he did the last thing on earth she would have expected. He bent his knees, slow and careful, and lowered his whole enormous frame down into the dirt. Right there in her yard, a mountain of a man got down on both knees, still clutching that hat. He made himself small without her ever asking. Clara's hand shot to the knife at her waist. "Don't you move a muscle," she ordered, her voice like a whip crack. "I'm not reaching for anything," he answered, his voice calm. "It's just—" He seemed to search for the right words. "Ma'am, it's been about 3 years since anyone's been glad to see me. I figured I'd be the smaller one for a minute." The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. A meadowlark started singing somewhere up on the ridge. Clara Whitlock stood in that broken doorway, a blade hidden in her skirt, looking down at a giant on his knees. He had just said the most honest thing she had heard in a very long time. Something inside her shifted, a feeling she couldn't put a name to and didn't dare to trust. She asked him, her voice cautious, "What is it that you want?" "Work," he said plainly. "I can fix what's broken. Your porch beam is sagging, and your chimney isn't drawing right. I can see the smoke stains from here. That pulley on your well is screaming every time you use it, too. I can fix all of it just for a place to sleep and a few meals. 2, maybe 3 weeks, and I will be on my way." "And what if I say no?" she challenged. "Then I will get up and leave. It is as simple as that. Just like that." She gave him a long, hard look. She saw the faded rope scars on his wrist where his sleeve was pushed back. She saw how he held that hat, not with nervous energy, but with a deep, settled calm. She saw the rifle on his back, and the fact he hadn't so much as glanced toward it. "What's your name?" she finally asked. "Elias," he said. "Elias Boone Mercer." "And where are you coming from, Elias Boone Mercer?" "From the south," he answered. "And west before that. The road behind me does not matter much. It matters to me." He met her eyes directly. "I came from Trinidad. Before that, Taos. Before that, a cattle drive out of Texas. It did not end well for a man who had it coming." Clara didn't ask which man. The way he said it told her that was a story he wasn't about to share. "You wanted by the law?" she asked, straight out. "Not anymore," he said. "There was a warrant back in '73. A judge threw it out 2 years ago. I have the papers if you need to see them." "So why do you still act like you are being hunted?" A quiet beat passed between them. A shadow crossed his eyes. "Old habits die hard," he replied. "Besides, some folks don't need a warrant to come after a man." Clara considered him for another moment. Then she stepped back from the doorway. "All right, come on in," she said. "I will make some coffee. You can sit at the table. But if you touch a single thing in this house, you are not supposed to. I will put this knife through your hand before you can even cry out. Is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am," he answered. He stood up slowly, as if giving her plenty of time to change her mind, and walked inside. He had to duck his head a good bit just to clear the door frame. Clara went to the stove, keeping her back straight and her hands from shaking. She slipped the knife from her skirt and placed it under the table right where her left hand could find it in a heartbeat. When he sat down, the coffee cup looked like a child's toy in his huge hands. That was the first thing she noticed. His big palm just swallowed it up, and the old chair groaned under his weight. He didn't seem to notice either thing. He held the cup with a gentleness that suggested he knew he could crush it without even trying. The second thing she noticed was how comfortable he was with the quiet. Most men, especially Jeb, couldn't stand it. They filled every silence with useless noise, terrified of what might be said if they stopped talking. This Elias Mercer just sipped his coffee and looked around the room. He was quiet for a full 3 minutes. It was Clara who finally broke the silence. "You mentioned Trinidad," she said, testing the waters. "That's Jeb Whitlock's old stomping grounds." His whole body tensed. It was a tiny shift, almost nothing. But she had spent years learning how to read men to survive. She saw it clear as day. "I know the name," he said carefully. "Do you know the man?" "I know of him." He paused. I heard he left a wife up in the High Valley. Heard he owed money to a few different men when he lit out. The story seemed to change depending on who was telling it. "And which story did you hear?" she asked, her voice steady as a rock. He looked her right in the eye. "The version I got was that you were the one who ran him off, that you had finally had enough of his nonsense." Clara put her cup down on the table. "That is a kinder way of putting it. I figured as much." "He did not just leave," she said, her voice hard and clear as glass. "He ran. He ran away owing the Halverson brothers $300, and he used the deed to this very place to secure that debt. It left me tied to it, unable to sell, unable to leave. All I could do was sit here and wait for his past to come knocking on my door." Elias didn't say a word. "No one ever came," she went on. "Mr. Halverson passed away in the winter of '74. His sons probably do not even know I exist. But for 3 years I have been waiting for a knock on that door, hoping it would mean the debt was finally settled one way or another." "So," he said, speaking slow and measured, "when I came knocking on your door, you reckoned I was one of them." "I thought perhaps my wait was finally over," she replied. "Yes?" He gave a single small nod and set his cup down with that same careful motion. Then he spoke again. "I am not here to collect on anything, Mrs. Whitlock. I am just a man who needs 2 weeks of honest work and a proper roof over my head, not just the big empty sky which feels like it is trying to wear me out most nights." "It is Mrs.," she corrected him. "Pardon me?" "It is Mrs. Whitlock. According to the law, I am still his wife. Jeb never saw fit to handle the paperwork." A look crossed his face. It was not pity. She would have hated that. It was something else entirely. It was a look of knowing, the look of a man who understood what it meant to be tied to something, a burden that had no right to hold her down anymore. "Mr. Whitlock," she said, fixing her mistake without making a big deal of it, "I will be out of your sight before the sun comes up and after it goes down. You will not even notice I am around, except for the things that start getting fixed." She gave him a long, steady look. "There is a lean-to behind the barn," she told him. "It will keep the rain off you. You will sleep there." "Yes, ma'am." "You will have your meals right here on the porch, not inside my house." "Yes, ma'am." "And if you ever, and I truly mean ever, raise your voice on this land for any reason at all, I will not waste my breath asking you to leave. I will simply make it impossible for you to stay." He met her stare, and she could see he understood the full weight of her words. "I understand you perfectly," he said, "and it will not be a problem." He started working on that porch beam that very same afternoon. Clara watched him from the house window, the same way she used to watch a thunderstorm build up over the eastern ridge, trying to understand something she did not quite trust. He worked without making a lot of noise. That was a surprise to her. The men she had known always had to make a big show out of their work, grunting and cursing, making certain everyone nearby knew what a tough job they were doing. Elias Mercer just got on with it. He inspected the beam, put his own weight on it to test it, and then got his tools from a saddlebag. His movements were fluid and sure. He did not rush, but he did not waste a single motion either. By the time the sun slipped down behind the western ridge, that porch beam was as solid as a boulder. He did not come knocking on her door to announce that he was finished. He did not ask her to come and inspect it. She just heard the soft creak of the lean-to door as he put his tools away for the evening. And when she stepped out onto the porch a little later to get the water bucket, she put her foot right on that board without a second thought, and it held solid. She stood there for a moment, just stood there, feeling the firmness of it. The next 3 days passed in much the same way. He fixed the draft in the chimney on the second morning. She knew because the dark smoke finally quit backing up into the house. He fixed the well pulley on the third day without her saying a word about it. On the evening of that third day, she brought a plate of food out to the porch herself instead of just setting it on the railing. She took a seat in the chair at the other end. He sat on the top step. He ate his meal slowly and deliberately. She watched the mountains in the east turn into dark shadows. "You mentioned a cattle drive that went bad," she said. "Down in Texas." He did not even flinch. "I did. What kind of trouble was it?" He was silent for a good long while. He was not trying to hide anything, just thinking it over. She could tell the difference. "There was a girl," he said at last. "A Lakota girl, about 14 years old. She wandered into our camp looking for her father's horse that had strayed off. The sheriff's son was riding with us. He got the idea in his head that she did not need to be taken back to her people. A heavy quiet settled between them. I put an end to it." Elias said things got out of hand. "I broke the boy's arm in 2 places. He ran and told his father that I attacked him for no reason. The sheriff believed his son, and the girl got home safely. Her father got a message to me through a trapper I knew. He wanted to tell me she was all right. So you took the blame for protecting her. I stopped a boy from doing something that could never be undone. That is all I did. And the warrant for your arrest. Assault and battery. I left before they could throw me in a cell. I have been on the run for 3 years. He stopped for a moment. The warrant is gone now, just like I told you. A judge looked into the whole situation and dismissed it. But that sheriff's son, he is 23 now. He glanced toward the dark ridgeline. Some men just get used to not having a place to belong. After a while, it starts to feel easier than trying to fit back in. She understood that feeling in a way that took her by surprise. The kind of understanding you have not because someone explains it to you, but because you have lived the same kind of loneliness, just in a different life. She did not say any of that to him. Not then. She just picked up his empty plate and went back into the house. On the 5th day, he came across the letters. He was not being nosy. He was reaching for something behind a grain shelf in the back room. She had asked him to check a weak spot in the floor joists, and his hand brushed against a bundle of folded papers tied up with a piece of brown twine. He carefully placed them on the shelf and did not even look at them. He put them right back where he found them as soon as the joist was repaired. But during supper, Clara saw his eyes glance toward that back wall for just a fraction of a second, and she said, "You found them." "I had to move them to get to the joist. I put them right back, exactly where they were. I did not read them." She was quiet for a bit. Then she said, "My daughter, Hannah. She is 21 now. She left 2 years before Jeb did. She went east to her aunt's house in Missouri, got as far from this valley as a person could. I cannot say that I blame her. Do you write to her?" "I write." A silence followed. "I just do not mail the letters." He was quiet for a moment. "How come?" "Because every single one of them starts out the exact same way. It starts with, 'I am sorry.' And I have been sorry for so long. I do not think the word has any real meaning left in it." Elias looked down at his own rough hands. "A word is only worth as much as the actions that come after it." "And what exactly is supposed to come after it, in your professional opinion?" The sharp tone in her voice was not aimed at him. He could hear that as clear as a bell. "The thing you do that is different," he said, just as simple as that. She looked directly at him. He was not preaching at her. He was not trying to give her a lesson on how to be saved. He said it the same way a man might say, "The chimney is drawing properly now. This was the problem. This is what fixed it. This is what you do next." She did not say a single word. He did not say a single word. The night grew deep and quiet over the valley. It was on the 8th day that the rider appeared on the south ridge. Elias was the first to see him. He was on the roof, checking the shingles, when a figure showed up against the afternoon sky. A man on a dark horse, just sitting there watching the property down below. Not moving, not getting any closer. Just watching. Elias slid down the side of the cabin and walked to the corner, trying not to look like he had seen anything. Clara was at the water barrel on the side of the house. "Do not look to the south," he said in a low voice as he walked past her. There is a rider on the ridge. He's been sitting there for 5 minutes. She froze completely. Her hand tightened on the bucket handle. Describe him, she said, her voice as steady as a rock. Dark horse, a thin man, average height, wearing a gray jacket. He is sitting awfully still. She closed her eyes for just 1 second. Cole Ransom, she said. Who is that? He used to ride with Jeb. He is the kind of man who only shows up if somebody sent him to find something, or if he's looking for something for himself. Her jaw became firm. It all ends up being the same thing when it is all said and done. Elias said, Do you want me to go up there and have a talk with him? I want you to go right back up on that roof, she said, and I want you to make absolutely sure he sees you up there. He understood immediately. You want him to see you are not out here all by your lonesome. I want that man to ride back over that hill and report that there's a fella the size of a smokehouse on my roof with a clear shot to the south ridge. Elias just said, That is a smart play. I have had to be. Then he climbed right back up the ladder. The rider up on the south ridge just sat his horse for another 10 minutes or so. Then he wheeled that animal around and disappeared over the top without ever getting any closer. That evening, Elias sat on the highest step of the porch and just pushed his food around his plate. Clara came out carrying 2 cups of coffee this time, not just one. She settled into her chair and said, He is going to tell Jeb. And Jeb, well, he will likely come calling. Elias turned his head to look at her. When he does, do you want me gone from here, or do you want me staying put? The question just hung in the quiet air right between the two of them. Clara clutched that warm coffee cup with both hands. She thought about the big carving knife she had stashed under the table. She thought about the $300 and the tangled-up deed to this piece of land. She thought about Cole Ransom sitting his horse so still up on that ridge, like a man counting up all the things he figured were his. She thought about how the porch beam under her feet did not moan and complain anymore. She finally said, I am done making choices because I am afraid. I lived that way for 7 years. I am finished with all that. That is not an answer, he said, his voice low. I know it is not, she said. She took a sip of her coffee. This is my property, she said after a moment. You are a man I hired to do some work on my land. If Jeb Whitlock has a problem with the man I choose to fix my roof, he can ride on up here and say it right to my face. Elias gave a short, single nod. All right then, he said. He went back to watching the valley get dark. She slipped back inside. She pulled the knife out from under the table, tucked it snug into the waistband of her skirt, and left it right there. On the morning of the 10th day, she went to the shelf in the back room. She worked the brown twine loose. She drew out the top letter from the pile, the newest one marked from back in April, and she read it through from start to finish just one time. Then she folded it up again, right along its old creases. She just sat there with it resting in her hands for the longest time. She thought on what Elias had told her. A word only has as much meaning as what follows it. She thought about all the things that had followed. The porch stood solid as an oak. The chimney drew clean and clear. The pulley for the well sang a new, steady kind of song. She thought about how she had slept all the way through the night without flinching at every little creak for the first time in 3 years. She walked over to her little writing desk. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. She started to write a new letter. She did not start it off with, I am sorry. She started it with, Hannah, the roof made it through the last storm. That is the first thing I need you to know. She stopped for a breath. She held the pen tight. Outside, she could hear the solid, steady beat of a hammer nailing down shingles. Elias was finishing the backside of the roof, the very one she had spent 2 years trying to patch up with tar cloth. She wrote, I want to tell you about the summer your house stopped falling to pieces. She wrote and she wrote until the afternoon light started to get long and soft. She did not seal the envelope, but she did fold the letter. And this time she left it sitting right there on the table instead of hiding it behind the grain shelf. That evening, Elias came up to the porch and saw the folded letter resting on the railing. He looked at it for a second. He looked through the open door at Clara, who was at the stove stirring something with her back to him. He never mentioned the letter. He just sat down on the top step. He picked up his coffee. He looked out over the valley, where the long purple shadows of a summer evening were stretching themselves across the tall grass. After a spell, Clara appeared there in the doorway. "It is not sealed," she said. "I have not made up my mind for sure." "Okay," he said. Well, it needed to exist somewhere besides tucked away behind the grain shelf." "All right," he said again, softer this time. She leaned her shoulder against the door frame. "You reckon I ought to send it?" He picked his words out real careful. "I think a letter left sitting on a table means the choice has already been made. You just have not said it out loud to yourself yet." She studied his face for a good long while before she turned and walked back into the house. She picked up that letter. She folded it shut. She set it right by the door, ready to go to the settlement post with the first light of a clear morning. Then she sat herself down at the table. And for the first time in what felt like another lifetime, Clara May Whitlock lowered her head into her hands. Not from sorrow and not from fear, but from something that felt an awful lot like the start of relief. And she just let the quiet settle in. Outside, the valley darkened. The roof stayed put. By morning, the letter was gone, not stolen. It was sent. Clara had carried it down to the settlement road herself, long before Elias had even stirred. She handed it to the Greer boy, the one who did the mail run on Tuesdays. And she walked back up the ridge path in the pale morning light, her hands feeling strangely empty, and her chest feeling like she had finally set down a heavy stone she had carried for so long she had plain forgotten its weight. She never told Elias she sent it. He never asked her. But when she stepped back into that cabin and smelled fresh coffee brewing and saw a new log sitting on the fire, she knew he understood all the same. It is the way quiet men can sometimes know things, without a single word passing between you, because they are paying attention while everybody else is busy making a racket. She poured herself a cup, sat at the table, and said nothing about Hannah or the letter, or the fact that her hands had trembled just a little on the walk back from the ridge. She simply drank her coffee and let the morning happen however it was going to. It was the 11th day, and a change had settled over that cabin, something that neither one of them had tried to put a name on. Elias finished the roof that afternoon. The whole blessed thing. The back slope, the north-facing side. The ridge cap she had spent 2 summers patching with nothing but tar cloth. He did it without any big show, just like he did everything else, and climbed down that ladder with wood dust in his hair and a look on his face that was the closest thing to satisfied she had ever seen on him. She was standing right there on the porch. "It will hold," he said, "good through the fall. Probably the winter, too, if you bank that north wall before the real cold settles in." "I know how to bank a wall," she told him. "I know you do." A still moment passed between them. "Thank you," she said. The words came out cleaner than she figured they would. Nothing attached to them. No wall built up behind them. Just those 2 words, plain as day. He gave one little nod and went to put his tools up. She stood on the porch a minute longer, listening to the sound of nothing dripping, nothing creaking, nothing about to fall down, and felt a feeling so peculiar it took her nearly a full minute to figure it out. Safe. She felt, in that one little spot in the world, safe. She did not trust the feeling, not one bit, but it was there. That was the very moment Cole Ransom decided it was time to ride back into the valley. She heard the horse before she saw it. That particular sound of a rider who was not in any kind of hurry, but was not trying to be quiet either, coming up the main track like he owned the whole place. She moved to the edge of the porch, but not off of it, and watched Cole come around the bend on his dark horse wearing a gray jacket. He had that same flat, still look on his face she remembered from the one time Jeb brought him to the cabin 3 years ago. They had played cards until 2 in the morning, and the night had finished with the sound of broken dishes. Cole Ransom was not a big man. He was the sort of fellow who made up for his size in other very pointed ways. He pulled his horse to a stop about 20 feet from the porch and looked straight at her. "Mrs. Whitlock," he said. His voice sounded friendly, but his eyes told a different story. "Cole," she replied. "Heard you got a man doing some work up here." "I have someone fixing the roof." "Well, it looks fixed now." He squinted up at the new shingles. "Reckon that set you back a pretty penny." "I am managing just fine," she stated plainly. "Jeb gets to worrying about you," Cole said. "He sent me to ride up and check on your affairs. Make sure you are not running into any trouble." That last word hung in the air like smoke. He meant for it to. "You tell Jeb," Clara said, her voice steady as a rock, "that I do not need his concern. You tell him this property is in fine condition, and I aim to keep it that way. He might just want to come see for himself. He is welcome to file the correct paperwork with a judge and make his plans for this property legal and known," she said. "Until that day comes, this is my land, and I am the one who says who steps on it." Cole just stared at her for a long, hard second. You could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "That mountain fella still poking around?" he asked. And right on cue, from around the side of the barn, came Elias Mercer, moving at a slow and steady walk. He had a splitting axe in one hand, his hat in the other. He did not say a single thing. He just stood there. Cole looked him over the way a small dog eyes a big one, doing the arithmetic, taking in the man's height, his broad shoulders, the old rope burns on his wrists, and the easy way he held that axe, not like a threat, but not putting it down either. "Mercer," Cole said. The air turned thick and heavy. Elias said, "Ransom." They knew each other. Clara's head snapped toward Elias. He did not even look her way. His eyes were locked on Cole, level and calm, giving nothing away. "Small territory," Cole said with a smirk. "Not small enough, it seems," Elias answered. Cole forced a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Working for an honest dollar these days?" "Always have," Elias said. "That is not the story Jeb tells." "Jeb tells a lot of stories that do not square with the truth," Elias said. "I figure you know that just as well as I do." Something flickered in Cole's expression. It was not fear, but it was a close cousin. "Jeb's gonna want to hear about this." "You tell him whatever you think he needs to hear," Elias said. "And while you're at it, tell him the woman on this land has a legal claim, with no active debt filed against the deed, and a clear title that traces all the way back to the Colorado Territory land grant of 1871. Tell him if he wants to dispute that, he can do it in front of a circuit judge for all the world to hear." Cole froze up completely. Cole froze up. "You looked up the deed," he said, his voice flat. "I did," Elias confirmed. "Turns out the Halverson debt died right along with Halverson himself. His sons never filed to take over the claim. It expired, clean as could be 2 years ago. This property is hers, free and clear, and it has been since the winter of 1874. Clara felt something inside her chest just let go. It was like a knot she had been carrying for 3 years without even realizing it had finally come undone, free and clear. For 2 years. She had been free for 2 whole years and had never known it. She turned to look at Elias. He still was not looking at her. His gaze was fixed on Cole, solid as a stone wall. Cole's eyes darted between the two of them, doing his math all over again. "Jeb's still her husband," he finally said, a pathetic little threat. The law says a whole lot of things," Clara cut in, her voice sharp as glass. "And I am fixin' to start using every single one of them. You can tell Jeb that too." Cole sat on his horse for another 10 seconds. Then, with not another word, he yanked the reins, turned his horse, and rode back down the path he came on. Elias watched until he was a speck in the distance. Only then did he finally turn and look at Clara. She was looking right back at him. "You looked it up." "It is yours," he said. "A week ago," he explained, he rode down to the settlement records office. It was the morning after he spotted Ransom up on the ridge. "You did not tell me." "Did not. I wanted to be sure before I told you something that important." She held his gaze. "You knew Ransom. Our trails have crossed." That is not what I asked. A moment passed between them. We both left the same part of Colorado in the same year, just for different reasons. I know the kind of man he is. He knows the kind of man I am not. What does that mean? It means he works for men like Jeb, Elias said. He watches things for them, keeps an eye out, and reports back what he sees. He will not pull a trigger himself unless he is in a fight he knows he can win with witnesses around. He is real careful that way. Is he dangerous? He is the kind of dangerous that does not look it, Elias said. And that is the worst kind there is. Clara let out a long, slow breath. Free and clear, she whispered. 2 years. Why did the records office not... Nobody filed the papers to let you know. Nobody had a reason to. You would have had to go looking for it yourself, and you did not even know you had something to look for. She sat down on the porch step, not because her legs felt weak, but because the news felt too big to hold while standing up. She needed to set it down for a minute while she figured out how to carry it. Elias sat on the step just below her, giving her the higher spot, giving her space. They sat like that for a good long while. He is still my husband, she said, legally. And right now, legal is the only thing that counts. There are lawyers down in Pueblo who handle such things, he said. Him abandoning you is reason enough. 3 years is more than enough time for any judge. I know that, she said. I have known it for a while. After another quiet moment, she added, I just did not know if knowing was enough to actually do something. It is a start, he said. She looked down the empty track where Cole Ransom had disappeared around the bend. He is going to tell Jeb everything, she said. Yes. Jeb is going to come. Probably. And when he does, Elias said, you will be a woman with a clear title to her own property, legal grounds for a divorce, and a witness to him trespassing if he sets 1 foot over that property line. He paused. And I will still be right here, fixing what needs to be fixed. She gave him a sideways glance. You said 2 weeks, maybe 3. I found a problem with the foundation on the east corner, he said, his voice flat as a board. That is going to take a bit longer. She looked him square in the eye. He just stared down the empty track. The corner of his mouth twitched just a little bit. She turned away before she said something that would make the next 10 minutes feel complicated. Supper is at 6, she said, and went inside. The door did not slam. That was new. It was the first time since he showed up that she had walked through a doorway without holding it tight behind her. He noticed. He did not make a big thing of it, but he noticed. Inside, standing all alone in her kitchen, Clara May Whitlock gripped the edge of the big wooden table with both hands. She whispered the words to the empty room, free and clear. Then she stood up straight, let go of the table, and started making supper like a woman with a job to do, which she was, which she always had been. The only difference was, now she was finally doing it on land that was truly all hers. The thought of it burned in her chest like good whiskey, clean and strong. She did not cry. She was all done crying about things that should have just made her mad. She was mad now, and that felt a whole lot better. 2 days passed, and the quiet felt like a wire pulled so tight it was about to snap. Elias kept working on the East Foundation. Clara kept her eyes on the South Ridge every morning, trying not to be obvious about it. No riders, no dust cloud from the track, nothing. And that was somehow worse than seeing something. It was the kind of nothing that meant a decision was being made somewhere far away from her. On the evening of the second day, Elias came up to the porch, his hands still caked with dirt from the foundation, and said straight out, I need to tell you something. I should have told you before. Clara put down the shirt she was mending. I know Jeb Whitlock, he said, not just his name. I crossed paths with him once, 2 years back, in a saloon down in Trinidad. I did not know he was your husband then. I did not even know your name. I just knew he was the kind of man I did not want to share a table with for any longer than I had to. She sat there, perfectly still. What happened in that saloon? He was talking to some other man about land, Elias said. about a specific piece of property up in the valley north of Segundo. He was saying the woman who lived on it had no claim that would ever hold up in a court of law, that her debt made the place ripe for the picking for any man who moved fast enough. He was drinking and talking too much, and I left before he was done making his pitch. He was trying to sell my land, she said, her voice cold and flat, while he was still married to me. That is what it sounded like. And the men he was talking to? I do not know if they ever acted on what he told them. I do not know if they ever looked into it. I moved on the next morning and did not give it another thought until I came up this ridge and saw this property and something. He trailed off. Something what? She asked. Something clicked, he said. The valley north of Segundo. The woman living alone. The trouble with the deed. I was already headed this way, looking for work in the high country because I was tired of the lowlands. But when I came around that last bend and saw this place, I knew. You knew whose land this was? I had a mighty strong suspicion, and you came to my door anyway. I came to the door, he said, because if I was right about who lived here, then I had some information that she might be in need of. And because I had been carrying that saloon conversation around in my head for 2 years without doing a thing about it. And that was not sitting well with me. Clara looked at him for a long, hard stretch. You could have told me that on the very first day, she said. I could have, he agreed. I did not know you then. I did not know how you would take news like that, or what you might do with it, or if I even had enough solid facts to make it helpful instead of just plain scary. I needed to check the deed first. So you decided what I was ready to hear and when I was ready to hear it. I decided what was a proven fact and what was just talk. He said, I was not protecting you from the information. I was protecting you from a rumor that was acting like it was a fact. There is a real difference between the two. She could feel in her bones that he was right. That did not mean it did not sting a little bit. You should have told me, she said, even if it was not proven. You should have let me decide what to do with it. You are right, he said. No excuses, no defense in it, just, you are right. She picked up her mending again. Her hands felt steadier than she would have thought. Is there anything else? Anything else you know, or suspect, or are waiting to prove before you think I ought to be told? No, he said. That is everything. You're certain? I am certain. She looked at him from over her sewing. If that situation changes, you tell me the very second it does. Whether it is proven or just a rumor, you let me be the one to decide. Yes, ma'am, he said. And this time those words felt different than they had on that first day. It was not just the automatic response of a man raised to be polite. It was something with more thought behind it, more personal. She noticed the difference. She did not comment on it. The foundation, she said. How many more days? He seemed to understand they were changing the topic. 2, maybe 3, if I find what I am expecting to find on the south corner. Go get some supper, she said. He got some supper, and this time she brought a second chair out onto the porch without him needing to ask. It was on the 14th day that everything seemed to happen at once. Clara had ridden down to the settlement for flour and salt, and a new buckle for a harness that had been broken since March. It was a normal trip. An hour to get there, 20 minutes of business, an hour to get back. She had done it by herself 100 times. She did not expect to return home and find a man sitting on her porch who was not Elias. He was young, in his early 20s, and slender, with a good horse tied to the railing. He had a face that might have seemed friendly in another situation, and his hat was pushed back on his head in a way that made him look even younger than he actually was. He was on his feet the second he heard her horse on the trail, and he made a show of putting his hands out to his sides far from his belt. Mrs. Whitlock, he said, I'm not here to stir up any dust. The name is Tom Aldous. I was riding with Jeb Whitlock this past spring. I quit his crew 6 weeks back, and I have been wrestling with what I know ever since. Clara pulled her horse to a stop about 8 feet from the porch. Where is Elias? She demanded. Out back, Tom told her. He knows I am here. He was already here when I arrived. He let me be. Just like he had been summoned, Elias rounded the corner of the cabin. He met Clara's gaze and gave a slight nod. one that said, "I have got the measure of him. He is no danger for now. It is up to you." She dismounted, secured the reins, and planted her feet at the base of the porch steps, staring up at Tom Aldis. "Speak," she ordered, and Tom Aldis spoke. He talked for a solid 20 minutes, and each thing he said was a heavier blow than the last. Jeb Whitlock had not liked what he heard in Cole Ransom's report one bit. Cole had told him about Elias and the whole situation with the deed. He explained that Elias had checked on it, the old Halverson claim was long dead, and that Clara had every right to a divorce. Jeb took it all in. And then, Tom said, he set his drink down mid-sentence and went stone-cold quiet. It was that look he got when he had settled on a course of action. He said he was not about to fight this in some courtroom, Tom explained. He said courtrooms are for fellas who cannot settle matters on their own. A cold dread washed over Clara. "He is coming here. He has been laying the groundwork for 2 weeks," Tom continued, right after Cole first reported back. "He has got 2 other fellas with him, not counting Cole. These are hard men, Mrs. Whitlock. Not like me. Not like the hands who are just in it for the pay. He is planning to hit hard and fast and make sure there are no—" He trailed off. "No witnesses," Elias finished, his voice right behind her. Tom looked over at him. He said, "Burn the cabin." He said, "Make it look like it was just a summer fire." The stillness that fell after those words was the most deafening sound Clara had ever known. She stood there at the bottom of her own porch steps, on her own land, with a deed that was free and clear, and she felt the hot flash of anger inside her cool down into something steely and far more dangerous. When Elias asked, "Do you know the exact day?" Tom replied, "No, but he was talking about doing it before the month was out. He wanted to hold off until after the settlement's monthly gathering, when most everyone would be gone from the valley. That is next Saturday. That is 6 days from now." "Why are you telling me this?" Clara asked, her voice low. Tom looked her square in the eye. A shadow passed over his young face. It was pure guilt. She recognized that specific look on a man who had gotten tangled in something ugly and was now desperately trying to find his way out. "Because I have a mother," he said. "And because I am not that sort of man. I did not realize what kind of crew I had joined until I was 2 months deep. And by that point, running off without a word felt just as wrong as staying put." Clara studied him for a long, quiet moment. "Are you prepared to tell all of this to a judge?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," he answered. "That is why I am here. I wanted to give you a heads up before I rode to Pueblo to track one down." "Then you had best get to finding one," she said, "and I suggest you ride like the wind." Tom Aldis gave a sharp nod, stood up, grabbed his hat, and was on his horse in under a minute. She watched him gallop down the south trail. Then she turned. Elias was looking right at her. 6 days, she said, her voice flat. "Could be less," he countered. "The second Jeb hears a young rider was seen near this place, Ransom will tell him about Aldis. He will push his whole timeline up." "So how much time do we actually have?" Elias thought for a moment. "The truthful answer? I do not know. Might be 6 days, might be tomorrow." Clara marched up the porch steps, pushed through her cabin door, and stopped dead in the center of her kitchen. She took it all in. The clean chimney, the sturdy floor, the window where an old smoke stain was now just a clean wall. She saw the table where letters were once tucked behind the grain shelf, and the chair where a big man with gentle hands drank his coffee and spoke the plain truth. She spun back around. Elias filled the doorway. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said. "I am all ears," he replied. "This here is my land, and I am going to keep it. No matter what happens between this moment and when Jeb decides to show his cowardly face, I am keeping this ranch, and I am doing it in the open, not hiding in the shadows, and not all by myself." "All right," he said simply. "First thing tomorrow, I need you to ride to the settlement and tell Hattie Greer every last word Tom Aldis said. Hattie's husband is on the Valley Council. I want people to know how things stood before anything kicks off. It was settled. Elias nodded. They will want a second signature on that deed. She replied, someone besides me and a clerk down at the records office, who can get up and state the facts of the law plain as day. I will ride it into town and get it notarized. I can take care of that when I talk to Hattie, he offered. She fell silent, and he waited her out. I need to know, she began, her voice tight, that if this thing goes sideways, and it might not, Lord, I pray it does not, but if we get to a point where a decision has to be made in a heartbeat, I need to know whose side you are on. Clara, he said, and it was the very first time he had ever used her first name. She froze. I was fixing to be gone in 2 weeks, he said. I told you that, and I meant it. The last thing I wanted was to drag my own problems onto your land. He stopped for a breath. But I went and checked on that deed because I could not just leave without knowing you had what was needed to hold on to what is yours. And I told you what happened at the saloon because I could not carry that weight alone anymore. He paused again, the quiet deeper this time. I am not going anywhere. That could come at a high price, she warned. Everything I have ever done that was worth a damn cost me something, he replied. I have gotten used to it. She held his gaze for a long time. Then she turned her head and looked out the window at the ridge, watching the summer twilight begin to creep over the high grass. There is a rifle above the door, she said quietly. Jeb never knew it was there. He thought the one under our bed was the only gun in the house. He was wrong about that, just like he was wrong about so many other things. Good, Elias said. I have been shooting since I was 9 years old, she added. My daddy made sure of it. Good, he said again. I am not asking you to fight my fight for me, she clarified. I know that, he answered. I am asking you to stand with me while I fight it. A new expression crossed his face, one she had not seen before. It was not exactly relief, and it was not quite thanks, but some combination of the two, with an older, deeper weariness underneath it all. It was the face of a man who had been on his own for so long, the idea of someone at his side was a foreign country. But now it was real. I can do that, he said. She nodded once. Get some rest, she told him. You have a long ride before the sun comes up. He started to walk away. Elias. He stopped in his tracks. Thank you, she said, for getting that deed, and for not saying a word to me until you knew for certain. There was a quiet moment. I was right that you should have told me sooner, and you were right that you had to be sure first. Both of those things can be true at the very same time. He stood there quietly for a second. I have never had anybody say that to me before. What is that? That two things that seem to be complete opposites can both be true? She looked him square in the eye. Welcome to being a person, she told him. He let out a short, surprised sound, almost a laugh, the kind that gets out when something catches you off guard. She had never heard him laugh before. It was a good sound. She saved it away in her memory without even meaning to. Sleep, she said one more time. He left. She stood right there in the middle of her kitchen for a good long while after the door to the lean-to shut. Then she went over to the main door and made sure the rifle hanging above the frame was loaded. It was. She had done that same check every single night for 3 years. Tonight was the first night she did it, not because she was afraid, but with the simple, clean resolve of a woman who knew what belonged to her, knew what it was worth, and had decided once and for all, with every bit of her soul, that she was done letting anyone try to take it from her. She went to bed, she slept, and somewhere far down the southern trail, a rider was already turning his horse to head north. Elias rode out before the sun had even peeked over the eastern ridge. Clara heard his horse on the trail in the pale gray light before 5 in the morning, and she knew the sound of a rider who had a real purpose. It was not the lazy clip-clop of a fellow with nowhere special to be, but the quick, steady pace of a man who had a list of things to get done, and every plan to see them finished. She laid there still for a minute, listening as the sound faded on down the valley. Then she got herself up, put on her clothes, and got the coffee started. The cabin felt different now that he was gone. She noticed it, and she did not like that she noticed it one bit. She ate her breakfast standing up at the counter, going over everything in her head the same way she looked over her land each morning, checking for any rot, searching for weak spots, looking for anything that needed fixing before it turned into a real problem. She thought about Tom Aldous riding south on his way to Pueblo. She thought about the notarized deed. She thought about 6 days, maybe less, maybe even the next day, and the cold, careful way Elias had talked. She thought about the rifle resting over her door. Then she went outside and started working in the garden before the heat got too bad. She was busy pulling weeds from the kitchen garden. The summer morning was already starting to feel heavy on her shoulders when she heard a horse coming up from the south. It was not Elias. It was too soon, and the rider was coming from the wrong direction. She stood up slow and turned, her hands caked with dirt, her face held in that neutral, waiting look she had gotten so good at, giving absolutely nothing away. It was Hattie Greer, not the Greer boy who brought the mail. It was Hattie herself, 62 years old, with a back as straight as a fence post, and the look of a woman who had heard some news and rode 8 miles on a Tuesday morning to talk about it face to face. She pulled her horse up at the garden gate and looked at Clara with eyes that were sharp, but also kind. "Your man paid a visit to our place," she said. "Before the sun was even up, he woke my husband and me and told us the whole story while standing right there in our kitchen." "He is not my man," Clara said plainly. "I am well aware of that," Hattie said. "Mind if I get down?" Hattie swung off her horse with the easy grace of a woman who had been getting on and off them for 50 years and did not have time to make a big show of it. She tied her horse to the gate post, walked straight up to Clara, and looked her right in the eye. "Gerald is riding out to round up the other members of the Valley Council this morning," she said. "He will have all 4 of them together before noon. We are going to do this by the book, Clara. There will be official notes taken, signatures on the land claim papers, and sworn testimonies from both Gerald and me confirming we heard Tom Aldous' story straight from Elias Mercer's mouth before any trouble got started." Clara felt a knot in her chest start to come undone. "Hattie, do not you thank me yet," Hattie said, her voice all business. "There is something else. Cole Ransom was over at the Dunute Ranch last night. Dunut's boy was up in the hayloft, kept quiet, and he heard Ransom talking to Dunute about everything going on up here. Ransom knows about Tom Aldous. He just does not know that the boy came to you. He thinks Aldous just up and quit the crew and has not done a thing yet, but he knows Aldous is aware of what is going on. They will find Tom before he ever makes it to Pueblo," Clara said, her voice empty of feeling. "That is what Gerald is figuring," Hattie answered. "He sent our oldest son south this morning to ride with Aldous for the rest of the way. 2 men are a lot harder to stop than 1, and our boy knows the secret trail through the canyon." Clara just stared at her. This woman had been her closest neighbor for 8 years, had brought her food when Jeb first vanished without ever asking a single question, had ridden out in the freezing cold of February in 1874 to tell her the news about Jeb and Pueblo, and then handed her a jar of preserved plums on her way out. Just a small, decent gesture of care. "You have been looking out for me," Clara said, as the truth of it all finally hit her. "This entire time." Hattie made a little sound that was not quite a brush-off. "Women look out for other women in this hard country. It is not about being charitable. It is about plain old common sense." She stopped for a moment. "How are you holding up?" The question was direct and it was personal. "How are you? Not how is the farm, not how are things, but how are you, Clara, standing right here in your garden with dirt on your hands and 6 days, maybe fewer, laid out in front of you?" "Angry," Clara answered, "which is a new feeling for me, and a better one." Hattie nodded her head like that was the only right answer. "Good. Anger builds walls. Being scared just makes you lock your doors." She was only there for about an hour, sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, while they talked through the hard facts. They went over what the Valley Council could do and what it could not, what a traveling judge might decide, and how much time they had if Tom Aldis made it to Pueblo and got back with a lawyer before Saturday. She got straight to the point and did not waste a single breath. By the time her horse was headed back down the trail, Clara was no longer a woman just waiting for trouble to find her. She was a woman already deciding how things were going to go. It was right then that she laid eyes on the note. She was turning to go back inside when she saw it, stuck right under the water bucket on the porch rail. Just a folded piece of paper, no envelope. She picked it up and unfolded it. There were only 8 words, written in a hand she recognized in a heartbeat. The letters were slanted and dug deep into the paper like they were written by a man who was taught his letters but never got friendly with them. Come out, or I will burn you out. J. The paper was bone dry, so it was left sometime recently, but not that morning. The fold was soft but permanent, like it had been carried in a pocket for a day or two. Someone had put it there in the black of night while she was asleep, with Elias sleeping in the lean-to not 12 feet from her. They had gotten that close. Someone had walked right up onto her porch in the dead of night, left that ugly note, and vanished without making a sound. Her hands did not tremble. Lord knows they wanted to, but she simply told them no. She took the note inside, laid it flat on the table, and walked right back out to her garden. Some things in this world just have to be done, and being scared is not a good enough reason to stop doing them. She was still out in that garden when Elias returned. He came up the trail at a pace that was not a full gallop, but it was fast enough to make her set down her trowel and get to her feet. He was off his horse before the animal even skidded to a stop, and she could tell by the hard line of his jaw that he had news. It was not good news, and he had been chewing on it for the last mile home. "It is notarized," was the first thing he said. "The deed is all legal, signed, and witnessed. Gerald Greer has a copy, the records office has a copy, and I have got one right here." "Good," she answered. "There's a note for you on the table." He went in, read it, and came back out. His face went real still. A look she recognized meant he was thinking instead of just feeling. He was turning it over in his mind, figuring out what the information meant, not just how it made him feel. "Someone was on our land last night," he said. "Yes, he is watching us." Elias figured the note did not come from Jeb himself. Jeb would not do his own dirty work. That is a job for Cole Ransom. He was here last night, and that means things are moving faster now. Clara repeated it. "Things are moving faster now." Elias nodded. "And there is something else." He waited a second. "I talked to a man in town, Frank Doss. He is the one who runs the livery stable. He said 3 strangers rode through a couple days ago, asking the way to the properties in the valley north of Segundo. They are Jeb's men, sure as anything, and they are already close by. Clara, they are not riding in from Pueblo or Trinidad. They are already here, hiding somewhere up in the high country." All of a sudden, her garden felt like the most exposed, unsafe place on earth. "How many?" she asked. Doss saw 3 horses. That would be Jeb, Cole, and one other man. Tom always had 2 fellas with Cole. That adds up to 3, the same number. And Tom Aldis is still on the trail to Pueblo. Gerald Greer's son is riding with him. Elias said they will get there all right, but they will not get back before this whole thing boils over. So, we do not have 6 days. She said it like a final judgment. We do not have 6 days. He agreed. She looked him square in the eye. "It will be tonight or tomorrow." That note said, "Burn you out." A fire needs the cover of darkness. It is a whole lot easier to call it a terrible accident in the pitch black of night. He held her gaze. "I reckon tonight is more likely than tomorrow." Clara looked over at her little cabin, at the roof Elias had mended, at the porch support that was now steady and quiet, at the window he had scrubbed until the old black smoke stains were finally gone. "No," she said. Elias just looked at her. "No, what?" "No. I will not spend my night huddled inside my own home, just waiting on some man to show up and put a match to everything that is mine." She turned to face him head on. "You told me you would stand with me while I fought this. I am still asking you to do just that. I know, he said, his voice low and steady. And I am still standing right here, are not I? The way he said it, so calm and sure, hit her somewhere deep. There was no brag in him. He was not making a show of being tough. He was just there. Just like that porch beam he fixed. Not asking for a big thank you. Just solid, present, and ready to take the weight. What do we do? She asked. We do not wait for them in the dark, he said. We drag this whole mess out into the daylight before they can keep it quiet. I am going to ride out to the Dunnett place, the Harlow claim, and the Frederick homestead. I will tell them every last thing I told Gerald Greer this morning. I want 6 families to know the whole story before that sun goes down. Because Jeb can bully one woman who is all by herself, but he cannot do a thing to a woman who has 6 Valley families watching his every move. That is going to take up most of the day, she pointed out. Yes, and it will leave this place empty. I will ask Mrs. Greer to have her daughter come stay with you while I am gone, he said. Clara's jaw set hard. I do not need... You are alone on a property that a man put in writing he was going to threaten last night, Elias stated. His voice was not mean or bossy, just full of plain fact. Having somebody here with you is not about whether you can handle it. It is about making sure there is a second set of eyes to see whatever happens, and to ride for help if it comes to that. She let out a long breath. All right, she said. I will be back by sundown, he promised. You had better be, she said back. He was already untying his horse. He made it back just as the sun was setting, but only by a hair. The light was all gold and throwing long shadows from the ridge when he finally rode up the trail. Clara could see a certain stiffness in the way he sat his horse from all the way on the porch, long before she could make out his face. She pushed herself up from her chair. Hattie's girl, Risa, all of 17 years old with calm, steady eyes, appeared in the doorway behind her. Get your horse, Elias said to Risa. Ride home, but take the long route. Do not use the south trail. Risa looked to Clara for confirmation. Go, Clara told her, and she went. Elias swung down from his horse, covered the porch steps in 2 long strides, and said, Cole Ransom is over at the Dunnett place. He was already there by the time I got to the Fredericks. I spotted his horse tied up from the ridge and turned my own horse around before he could see me. He is getting ahead of me, talking to the same folks. Telling them what? I could not say. But the Fredericks sure looked at me different when I was leaving than they did when I got there. Whatever Ransom filled their heads with this morning, it stuck. What kind of story? Elias was quiet for a moment too long. He told them about my old arrest warrant, he finally said. He did not mention it was thrown out, just that I had one. And he told them... He trailed off. What? He told them about a Lakota girl I knew. The way Ransom told it, I did not save her from anything. I was the one who started all the trouble. The whole world just stopped for Clara. She knew exactly what that snake Ransom had done. It was like taking a knife to a man's character. You find the one thing a man is proudest of, the one decent thing he did in a long time of doing wrong, and you twist it and turn it until it looks like the ugliest thing he ever did. You take a sliver of the truth and bend it just enough so it still looks like the real thing. And back in 1876, in a high Colorado valley full of families who did not know Elias Mercer from Adam, a story like that would take root. Did any of them ask you about it straight? She said. The Fredericks did. I told them the whole story. The girl, the sheriff's boy, the warrant, the dismissal. I even told them I had the papers to prove it. Did they believe you? I do not rightly know, he said. The husband looked like he wanted to. The wife, well, she was not so sure. Clara turned and walked into the cabin. She went straight to the small writing desk, pulled out some paper and a pen, and sat herself down at the table. What are you doing? Elias asked from the doorway. I am writing, she said. She wrote without stopping for a good 10 minutes. He did not say another word. She could feel him standing there, not crowding her, just being there, while she put down the plainest, most honest story she could about Elias Boone Mercer. She wrote about what he did the day he showed up, What he had told her, what it cost him in sweat and long hours to research the deed, what he had done, and most important of all, what he had not done. That was the part that counted the most. The list of things he could have done but chose not to. The list of lines he could have crossed, but always stayed on the right side of. She signed her name to it and put the date. She folded the paper neatly and looked right up at him. "Take this to Gerald Greer tonight," she said. "Tell him to read it aloud at the Valley Council meeting. I know what that man Ransom is trying to do. He is not trying to make the Valley families think that you are dangerous. He is trying to get them to stay out of it, to decide this whole business is too messy, too much of a bother, and best left alone. He needs them to just look the other way." She held the letter out. "This is the reason they should not." Elias looked at the letter she was holding. Then his eyes went back to hers. "You did not have to go and do this," he said. "You looked up my deed," she said. "I reckon this makes us even." He took the letter from her. He held it the same way he held that coffee cup. He was gentle with it, real mindful of its weight. He said, "I will be back." "I know you will," she told him. After he rode away, she took the rifle down from its spot above the door. She sat in the chair that faced it, made herself eat a little something, and forced her mind to think clear. Jeb was somewhere in the territory. His hired guns were right here. Cole Ransom was pulling every string he could to make sure that when it all went down, there would not be a single soul left in the valley to see it, and no help from the folks around here. Tom Aldis was still 2 days from Pueblo, and that meant 2 days back. The circuit judge was a week away if she got lucky. She was just one woman, all by herself on a dark stretch of land with a rifle across her lap, a letter on its way, and the future of 6 valley families resting on her shoulders. She thought about what Hattie told her. Anger builds walls. Being scared just locks the doors. She was not scared. She kept poking at that feeling, kind of like you would a sore spot, pushing on it gently to see if it was getting infected or just bruised. She looked for fear, but all she came up with was a cold, sharp anger that showed her exactly where her lines were drawn, and just how far she was willing to go to protect them. When the knock finally came, it was not anything like the first time. It was not polite. It was not patient. It was a man's fist hitting the door 3 hard times with the kind of power that does not ask for an invitation. Clara stood up from the chair with the rifle in her hands and said loud and clear, "I am armed. State your name and your business." There was silence for about 2 seconds. Then a voice she had not heard in 3 long years. "It is your husband, Clara. Open this door." Jeb Whitlock's voice had not gotten any better with time. It was the same one she remembered. It was not loud or booming, but it had the weight of a man who was used to getting what he wanted just by making people think they did not have any other choice. "This is my property," she said. "Your name is not on the deed, and you have no legal business being here. Go away, Jeb. I am not going anywhere. Then you can just wait right out there until morning. I will ride to the settlement then, and have you formally trespassed off this land," she said. "One way or another, you are not coming through this door." There was a pause. "Cole tells me there is a man living here. There is a man here doing paid work on this property. He sleeps in the lean-to. He is an employee. You do not get to have a say in that. He is a wanted man. His warrant was thrown out 2 years ago. I have the papers that say so." A moment passed. She could hear the scuff of boots on the wooden porch. They were moving around, testing the boards, making a slow circle. It was more than one fella out there. "Open this door, Clara. Do not make this any harder than it has to be." "Jeb," she said, "I need you to listen to me, and listen real good. I am holding a rifle. I have a land deed, signed and notarized. I have written statements from the Valley Council about what you are up to, told to them by someone who saw it all. And I have a letter from that same witness that is on its way to the Public Lands Office right this minute. If you put so much as a scratch on this place or threaten me on my own property, there are 6 families in this valley who know enough to make darn sure you answer for it." There was only silence. She could hear her own heart thumping in her chest. 1, 2, 3. Then she heard Jeb's voice again, quieter this time. There was something meaner hiding under it. "You have gotten mighty bold. I have gotten informed," she told him. "There is a powerful difference. Where is your mountain man now?" "Close enough." It was a bluff saying that. She had no earthly idea how close Elias was. She did not know if he was still over at the Greer place or heading back on the road. But she said it with every bit of certainty she could muster, because certainty was the only thing she truly owned in that moment. And she had learned a long time ago that when you are outnumbered, acting sure of yourself can be its own kind of weapon. The boots on the porch started moving again. She followed the sound, just like her daddy had shown her. 2 men were out front, and maybe a third was creeping around the side of the house. "I am going to count to 3, Jeb said. "When I get to 2, I'm going to put a round right through this door, chest high." Clara said, "You go right ahead and try me." A long, heavy silence stretched out. Then she heard the sound of boots stepping off the porch. They were backing off, not running, keeping it calm and collected. It was the retreat of a man who was mad as a hornet, but not a fool. A man who was changing his plan, not giving it up. She did not move an inch. She stood right there in the middle of her kitchen with that rifle aimed at the door, and she held her ground for a full 10 minutes. She did not so much as shift her weight or try to loosen the knot in her shoulders. She just stood there, and she listened. She heard horses moving off, heading down toward the south track. They were not leaving, just finding a new spot. She crept to the window, staying to the side so she would not be a target, and peered out into the dark yard. 3 horses stood at the edge of the trees, far enough back to be mistaken for shadows. They were waiting. They figured they could wait her out. They would wait until she had to sleep, or until Elias came riding back all by himself on a trail where 3 men were lying in wait, or until the sun came up and they could handle things in a different way. Her mind raced, thinking through her options, fast and sharp. She could not stay up all night, and she could not let Elias ride headfirst into an ambush on the south track without any warning. She went to the back of the cabin, to the window that looked out over the lean-to and the barn. She slid it open, nice and quiet. No one was on this side of the house. She could still make out the 3 horses down by the south tree line. They had not split up to surround the place. That was their mistake. She grabbed the rifle. She climbed right out that back window. She was across the yard in 15 seconds, staying in the shadows along the barn wall, making for the paddock where she kept her horse. She got him saddled in the pitch black. She had done it 100 times and did not need a lamp. She led the horse out the north side of the paddock, away from the trees and into the tall grass behind the barn. Then she swung herself up onto his back, and she rode. Not down the south track where they were watching, but north, up the ridge path and into the high country. She knew every twist and turn and rock up there, and Jeb Whitlock's hired guns did not know a thing about it. She would loop around and come down the back track that ran west of the settlement road. She would get to Elias before Jeb's men could, and she would be long gone from that cabin when they finally got tired of waiting. The horse moved steady and sure under her in the dark, because he was her horse, and he knew these hills just as well as she did. And Clara May Whitlock rode with that rifle laid across her saddle, her jaw set tight, the night air cold on her skin, and a feeling in her heart that was perfectly sharp and clear. She had spent 3 years waiting. She was done with waiting now. The trail was skinny, and the night was as black as coal. Somewhere down below her, 3 men were keeping an eye on an empty cabin. And somewhere on the settlement road, a man who had stayed when he could have just left was riding toward a fight she had no intention of letting him face, all by his lonesome. She pushed the horse into a canter. The ridge rose up dark and solid on all sides, and the stars were like sharp little diamonds, the way they only get in the high country during the summer. And Clara May Whitlock rode on through the darkness toward the only ending she would accept: her land, her name, her choice, and the sound of hoofbeats up ahead on the west track that she was almost positive, almost completely sure belonged to a horse she knew. "Elias," she called out into the night. There was a pause from up the trail. "Clara," she urged her horse forward. "They are down at the south tree line," she said, pulling up alongside him on the narrow path. "3 of them. Jeb is with them." I climbed out the back window. He just stared at her. She could see his face pretty well in the starlight, and what she saw there was not surprise or respect or even relief. It was something more tangled up than that, and a whole lot more honest. "You rode out through the back. I was not about to let you ride back alone on that track," she said. "I know," he said. "Greer, Gerald is riding with 2 councilmen. They are about 20 minutes behind me." "20 minutes?" she asked. "20 minutes," he said again. She thought about those 3 fellas waiting by the south tree line, about Jeb coming up with a new plan, about Cole Ransom, who was always so careful about having witnesses, and about the note that said he would burn you out. "They will see we are both gone," she said. "They will go inside the cabin." "I know. The cabin is just a bunch of wood," he said. "You can always rebuild a building. You fixed that roof," she said. The words just came spilling out before she could make them sound any less raw. "I know," he said, his voice quiet. "And that is not nothing to me. But it is not worth you, and it is not worth letting Jeb put you in a tight spot, facing down 3 armed men in a dark cabin all by yourself." She looked him square in the eye through the dark. 20 minutes, she said. "If Gerald rides like the wind. Jeb has no idea the council is coming." "No," Elias confirmed, "he does not." The night was dead quiet all around them. "So we head back," Clara declared, "but not on the south track. We will come in from the north, the same way I came out. And we are going to make a whole lot of noise coming down that ridge, so they know we are there before we ever get there." "You want them to know we are coming?" he asked. "I want them to have to make a choice," she said. "In the dark, on my land, with valley councilmen 20 minutes away. They need to decide if this is still the night they thought it was when they first showed up." Elias was quiet for a second. "You are not scared," he said. "I am scared to death," she admitted. "But I am a heck of a lot more angry than I am scared. And I have decided that will just have to be enough." A look passed over his face in the dark, one she could not quite name and did not have the time to figure out. "All right," he said. "We ride back." They turned their horses toward the North Ridge path. High above, the summer stars shone cold and sure. Down below, by the southern tree line, 3 men were about to find out that the woman they came to run off had not just been waiting for them. She had gone to fetch her own kind of help, and bless their hearts, she was on her way back. They came clattering down the North Ridge path, not trying to be quiet about it one bit. That was the whole point, Clara's idea, and Elias had understood it right off. He got it like a good builder gets how a joint should fit before anyone has to draw him a picture. You do not go sneaking up on 3 armed men in the dark on your own land. You let them know you are coming loud and clear, so they have to decide who they are before the situation does it for them. The sound of the horses' hooves on the rocky path echoed in the dark summer air, like somebody was ringing a dinner bell on purpose. Clara kept her rifle resting across her saddle. Elias rode about half a length in front and to her left, with his own rifle in his hand. It was not aimed, not looking for a fight, but it was there, just a simple fact. The way a mountain is a fact. They came around the north bend of the property, and the cabin finally came into view. For one heart-stopping second, Clara feared the absolute worst. She half expected to see the flicker of a fire against the windows, to catch the scent of smoke, and know she had misjudged everything. But the cabin stood there, dark and whole, exactly as she'd left it. And the 3 horses were still tucked in by the southern trees, right where she'd spotted their tracks, just waiting. Except now their waiting was not so still. They were getting restless. She watched 3 figures pull away from the dark woods as she and Elias made their way down the ridge. She saw them step out of the shadows, becoming men on horseback, and the whole feel of the thing changed in a heartbeat. 2 riders coming down from the north, 3 men waiting by the trees, and her cabin sitting right in the middle, the very thing they were all about to have a disagreement over. "Jeb," Clara called out. Her voice was solid, without a single tremor. It was the voice she used when she meant every single word, having already weighed and measured each one. "My name is on the deed to this place. That deed is notarized and properly filed. I have a witness's statement down in Pueblo, and members of the Valley Council are just 20 minutes behind us on this same trail. Whatever you plan to do here tonight, you better think real hard if it's worth what will come after." The tree line answered with nothing but silence. Then, Jeb Whitlock nudged his horse forward, leaving the shadows and moving into the open yard. And for the first time in 3 years, Clara got a clear look at him. He was thinner. That was what she noticed first, though she hadn't thought it would matter. And it did not, but she noticed it anyway. He was thinner, and his face looked harder, with the tight jaw of a man who had been drinking too much and eating far too little for a good long while. He looked like a version of himself that had been left out in a hard rain for too long. "You brought company," he said, his eyes on Elias. "I brought an employee," she corrected him. "And you brought 3. Cole tells me this one has a record." "Cole tells you a lot of stories that are missing their endings," she fired back. Elias Mercer's warrant was thrown out back in 1874 by a judge who bothered to look at the whole picture. If Cole conveniently forgot to mention that part, you should probably ask yourself why. Jeb's eyes moved over to Elias. Something shifted in his face. A quick bit of arithmetic, a weighing of odds. That specific look a man gets when he is trying to figure out if he likes his chances in a fight. "Big fella," Jeb grumbled. "Jeb," Elias said. His voice was level, not hunting for trouble, but not giving an inch of ground either. It sounded like a heavy gate being firmly latched. "I heard what you said to those men in the saloon back in Trinidad. About the deed, about this land. You were drunk and your mouth was running, and I was sitting just 2 tables away. I have been holding on to that piece of news for 2 years. The silence that fell then was a whole different kind of quiet than before. Jeb went completely stiff. "I do not know you," he said. "You did not see me," Elias answered. "That does not mean I was not there." Something about the way Jeb held himself changed. The numbers he was running in his head were changing. This was a new fact dropped into an already bad situation, and Clara could see him trying to solve the problem, and she could see he did not like the answer he was getting one bit. From the trees, Cole Ransom's voice cut through, cautious and steady. "Jeb, let's ride." "I am not done here," Jeb snapped, his stare still fixed on Elias. "Yes," Cole said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You are." Clara turned her head. Cole Ransom was not looking at Jeb or Elias. He was looking up the North Trail, at the path behind her and Elias. And in that look, she saw something that truly surprised her. Something that made her completely rethink what she knew about Cole Ransom, and not in any way she would have ever guessed. He was afraid. Not of Elias, and not of her. He was afraid of the storm that Tom Aldous had stirred up. "Cole," she said. He looked over at her. "You know this is finished," she said. "Whatever Jeb told you, whatever he promised you, you know Tom Aldous is in Pueblo at this very moment. You know this deed is legal. You know I have the Valley Council on my side." She let the words hang there in the cool night air. "You are a cautious man. You have always been cautious. Be cautious right now." A change came over Cole's face. She could not put a name to it. He was not the kind of man to show his thoughts openly, but he turned his horse. He did not say a word to Jeb. He did not offer any excuse or try to explain himself or even look back. He just turned his horse and rode south, disappearing into the dark. The third rider, a young man she did not know who was little more than a shadow, followed right on his heels without a sound. It was the way young men follow when an older man makes a fast choice, and going along just seems like the only smart move available. And just like that, Jeb was standing all alone in the yard. He watched the two horses vanish. He looked at Clara. He looked at Elias. He was doing the math again, but all the numbers were adding up wrong now, no matter which way he tried it. And she could see it plain as day on his face. The very specific look of a man who came expecting to find a lone woman and discovered a completely different problem waiting for him. "You think this settles anything?" he sneered. "I think this particular evening is settled," Clara said. "And I think you should leave before the council arrives. Because if Gerald Greer finds you on my land in the dark after what Tom Aldis told him, the talk you will have with him is going to be a whole lot worse than the one you are having with me. This is still my—" "It is not," she cut him off. "It has not been yours since the day you walked away. It was never yours in the way you believed it was. Go on, Jeb. Just go." He stared at her for a long, hard moment. She held his gaze and did not blink, did not soften her face, and did not give him anything to fight against. Just a solid, unwavering final answer to a question he had been asking ever since he left her. She did not belong to him. This land did not belong to him. There was nothing left here for him to try and take. He turned his horse. He rode south. She watched him go until she could no longer hear the sound of the hoofbeats. Then her hands, which had been as steady as stone through the entire thing, began to shake. Not in a big, obvious way, just with that small, quick tremble that happens when your body finally lets go of something it has been holding on to with all its might. She tightened her grip on the stock of her rifle and breathed through it, not making a sound. Elias swung down from his horse and came to stand beside her. He did not try to touch her. He just stood there with his hand resting on her horse's neck and asked quietly, "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said. "Just need a minute." He gave her the minute. She took it, breathing evenly until the shaking stopped, letting it work its way out of her. She told her hands to be still again, and after a little while they obeyed. She got down from her horse. She stood in her own yard on her own land, beneath a sky full of summer stars, and she looked at her cabin, her roof, her porch, her chimney standing straight and true, and she thought, it held up. The roof held up. "You knew he would back down," she said to Elias. "I knew Cole would," he replied. "Cole's need to save his own hide is a whole lot sharper than Jeb's pride. And as soon as Cole left, Jeb was by himself, and he knew it. But you were not certain, were you?" "No," he said, "I was not certain. But you rode down that ridge all the same." "You rode down first," he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "I was just following your lead." She looked at him. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Do not downplay what you did. You knew there were 3 armed men in that yard, and you rode straight in." "So did you." "I live here," she said. "So did I," he said. "For a time." The words hung in the still air between them, and they both understood the weight of them, but neither one of them added anything more. Not right then. Because there were hoofbeats coming down the North Trail, and 6 minutes later, Gerald Greer rode into the yard with 2 other councilmen. And just like that, the night became about practical matters again for a good long while. Gerald was the sort of man who needed to talk a problem all the way through just to understand it. And he talked for a good 20 minutes, absorbing the story of the night with the intense focus of someone building a legal argument inside his own head. As he listened, he asked very specific questions. He asked them of Clara first, and then of Elias. And then he circled back to Clara one more time. He did not write a single thing down. He had not brought any paper with him, but Clara had the feeling that every last word was being carefully sorted and filed away behind his calm, gray eyes. When he was finally satisfied, he looked at both of them and said, "Cole Ransom, leaving when he did. That is extremely important. A man like Cole does not ride away from a situation unless he is already sure it is a lost cause. He will not be coming back." "And Jeb," Clara said. Gerald was quiet for a second. "Jeb is a man full of pride. Proud men do not always make the wisest decisions, But proud men who are made to look foolish right in front of their own people, well, they generally need some time to lick their wounds before they try anything again. You have bought yourself some time, Clara. Use it. The circuit judge is in Pueblo, which is 3 days south. Tom Aldis will get there tomorrow afternoon, and that is the absolute earliest. Add another day for the judge to hear the story and draw up the official papers. You are looking at 5 days at a minimum before anyone with real legal power gets here. And for those 5 days, Gerald said, you are not going to be on this property alone. I am sending my second boy up here in the morning. He can sleep out in the barn. And in the morning, I am going to have a word with the Fredericks, the Harlows, and the Dunits about what a real community watch is for when one of their own is in trouble. He turned his head toward Elias. You are staying here, he said. It was a statement, not a question. I am staying, Elias confirmed. Gerald gave a firm nod. He looked back at Clara. You have handled this with more grit than most men I know. I have had 3 years of practice getting ready, she answered. An hour later, he and his councilman rode off, and a quiet fell over the property once more. But this was a different quiet than the heavy silence of waiting from before. This was a quiet that came after the storm, not before it. It was the calm you feel standing in a field after a big thunderstorm has finally rolled on by. Clara put on a pot of coffee. She and Elias sat out on the porch. They let the darkness gather around them, letting the peace that comes after sundown settle in. Tom Aldis, she finally said into the quiet of the night. He is already on his way, Elias replied. The day that Judge arrives, I'm filing the divorce papers. She went on, I want the whole thing settled at once. I do not want to drag this out over 2 separate hearings. I want a single day to put an end to all of it. Gerald can arrange that. I know. A silent moment passed between them. I have been his wife in the eyes of the law for 11 years. The day I am no longer his wife has to be the same day he answers for what he tried to do tonight. Elias nodded slowly. He cupped his hands around his coffee mug and stared out at the dark shape of the ridge. What happens next? He asked. His question was careful, with its true meaning sitting right there in plain view, the way big questions often do, hinting at something without ever touching it directly. After, she said, I have a piece of good land with a clean title and a roof that keeps the rain out. I have a letter making its way to my daughter, one she might not even open. I have a garden that needs to be harvested before the first frost, and a north wall that needs reinforcing, and I have a legal battle that is finally about to turn in my favor. She paused for a breath. I have more than enough to keep me busy after all this. You know that is not what I was asking, he said, his voice soft. She turned to look at him. He was still gazing at the ridge, not at her. He was giving her an easy way out, a chance to pretend she did not understand, to let the matter drop, to leave his question hanging in the air for another night, or maybe forever. I know what you meant, she said. I told you I would be moving on, he reminded her. I thought it would be 2 weeks, maybe 3. I said the foundation would take longer. And he had been right. It did take longer, but the foundation is solid now. And Elias, his voice faded. The east corner, she said, cutting him off. You found that problem with the east corner. It is fixed now. I know. Another silence stretched out. There is a problem with the north wall, a bigger one than just bracing it. The timber frame inside that wall has been wrong ever since that hard winter back in 1873. I have been doing my best to patch it, but I have not been able to fix it properly. He went completely still. I do not know the first thing about timber framing, she said, but I figure a man who can fix a chimney draft and a foundation corner could probably take a look and tell me what needs doing. The silence that followed felt different from all the ones that had come before it. It had a new kind of weight. It was the quiet of 2 people standing on a narrow step, their shoulders nearly touching, with both of them fully aware of it. I could take a look, he said. In the morning, she replied. In the morning, he agreed. She went back into the house. He stayed there on the step, and she lay in the darkness of her room for a long while, listening to the night sounds of summer, and later the quiet shuffle of him getting settled in the lean-to. She thought about 11 years, and 3 years, and 14 days, and how people say time is a straight line, but it certainly does not feel like one. That night, she slept without the rifle near her bed. She did not even notice she had done it until the sun was up. The 5 days that followed felt like letting out a breath you did not even know you were holding. Gerald Greer's second son, a quiet 15-year-old named William, arrived the next morning with a bedroll. He had a serious way about him that reminded Clara of his mother, and she liked him instantly. He settled into the barn without a single complaint, asked where he could be the most help, and then simply started working without needing to be told again. Elias examined the north wall's framing that first morning. He said a 12-foot section of it had to be replaced from the ground up, and that it would be 4 full days of hard work. He said it with the same plain confidence he had used when he told her the porch beam would take one afternoon. And Clara asked, "How much will the materials cost?" He gave her a fair number, and she just said, "Fine." And that was the end of it. There were no long explanations, no haggling over the price, just 2 people who had found a way to work together and were sticking with it. The whole valley felt different during those 5 days. On the surface, it seemed quieter, but she knew better from Hattie's daily updates. Hattie sent a message over every morning with the milk from the Greer farm, a small, folded note tucked into the jar lid. Clara found it both practical and kind. The notes let her know that things were not quiet at all. Gerald had paid a visit to all 6 families in the valley. The Fredericks had a change of heart once they heard the full story from Gerald, instead of just the half version from Cole. The Dunits were keeping their opinions to themselves, but had agreed to the plan to watch over things. The Harlows sent their oldest daughter up with a jar of honey and a note that just said, "We are keeping our eyes on the South Track." That was all it needed to say. Cole Ransom was not seen. Jeb was not seen. Jeb was... The South Track was quiet, and that quiet felt like a different creature now. It was not the quiet of something waiting for its moment, but the quiet of something that had been pushed back and was still trying to find a new way forward. On the 3rd day, a letter arrived. Clara was at her work table when William returned from the mail run holding a small envelope. He had the look on his face that a boy gets when he knows he is holding something important, even if he does not understand why. She took it, and a feeling seized her chest before her mind could even recognize the handwriting she had not laid eyes on in 5 years. The postmark was from Missouri. Her hands began to tremble in that same way, not from weakness, but from something too large happening all at once. She sat down hard at the table. She tore the envelope open. The letter inside was 3 pages long, written on the front and back in her daughter's handwriting. The same hand that had learned to write at this very table, a hand Clara had guided on cold winter nights 20 years ago when Hannah was just a small girl, and the world outside was harsh and cold, and the cabin had been warm and whole and safe. She read the letter. Then she read it again. Then she laid it on the table, placed her hands flat on either side of it, and just stared, without saying a word, for a very long time. William had the good sense to go back outside. When Elias came in for water in the middle of the day, he saw the look on her face and stopped in the doorway. "Good news or bad news?" he asked. "Both," she said. "She is coming." He did not say anything. He just waited. "She has been waiting," Clara said as she picked up the letter. That is what she wrote. She has been waiting for a letter that did not start with the words, "I am sorry." And when this one arrived, she read it 4 times in 1 day. Clara's voice was firm, but only just. "She says she has been with her aunt, but her aunt is not doing well, and she was never supposed to stay there forever. She's been trying to figure out what to do next, she says." Clara paused. "Take your time," he told her gently. "She says she needs to know if the valley is truly like she remembers it, or if she has just built it up in her mind." Clara went on. "She says she is not making any promises. She says she will come for a visit just to see." "That is enough," Elias said. "Is it really?" "It is a start," he said. "That is all a visit is meant to be." She looked down at the letter, at Hannah's handwriting, a grown woman's hand now, not the girl's who had run away. "She is 21 years old. She has been gone since she was 16. 5 years. I do not even know the person she is now." "I reckon she does not know you either," he said. "Not the woman you have become. You all will have to get to know each other all over again." "Does that scare you?" she asked. She was not sure why she asked him that question. It was not his trouble to bear, but she asked it anyway. "When my mother was dying," he said, "I went back home after I had been away for 3 years. She did not ask where I had been or why I had not come home sooner. She just asked me if I was hungry." He took a deep breath. "We did not fix everything that was broken between us, but we had supper together. We talked about the weather, and we talked about a horse she had bought the spring before, and by the time I had to go, we had found enough common ground to stand on." Another pause. "Sometimes you cannot fix it all. Sometimes you just need a solid patch of ground to start building on again." She looked at him. "You never told me about your mother," she said. "You never asked," he replied. "I am asking now." He sat in the chair opposite her, not just on the edge and keeping his distance, but settling in like a man who knew he had a place there. "She passed 2 years ago before I came north. She was a strong, practical woman who never wasted a word, and she passed in her own bed under her own roof, which was all she ever hoped for." "You were with her?" "I was with her." "Good," Clara said, her voice soft. "Yeah," he breathed. They sat together at the table in the stillness of the afternoon, letting the quiet settle around them. It was not the wary silence of two strangers testing the waters. It was the easy quiet of two people who were done pretending and could just be. Hannah's letter lay on the table between them. She will come visit, Clara thought. She will come and see the roof that held, the porch that is level, and the trail that does not turn to mud in a storm. She will see what this place became after I quit feeling sorry for myself. She will see the third chair. The thought appeared out of nowhere, and she looked up, finding Elias's eyes on her. He had that steady, truthful gaze she was getting used to. The look of a man who understood how to make waiting mean something instead of just letting time pass. "The north wall," she said. "Another 2 days," he answered. "And after that there is the south fence," he added, his tone almost too normal, too straightforward, in a way that could not quite cover up the real meaning. "I noticed it last week. The third post from the corner is not set right. If that post is not set deeper, the first hard freeze will push it clean out of the ground." She looked him square in the eye. "That looks like a half-day of work, I figure," she said. "Probably so," he agreed. "And after that is done?" He met her gaze. "I reckon there's always another job that needs doing," he said. She studied him for a long, quiet moment. Then she rose from her chair, moved back to her work table, and said over her shoulder, "Supper is at 6 o'clock." "Yes, ma'am," he answered. And this time, his words felt close and true. 5 days later, Tom Aldous returned. He came back with the Greer boy and a circuit judge named Hartwell. The judge was a man of 60 with knowing eyes, and the sort of impatience that comes from seeing too many simple cases get dragged out. He came onto Clara's property at 11 in the morning. He took down Gerald Greer's sworn statement right there on the porch. He reviewed the notarized deed. He went over Elias's written account of the Trinidad saloon, and then he gave Tom Aldous a full 45 minutes of his attention. The judge listened with the kind of intense focus a man has when he bills by the hour and makes every second worthwhile. Then he fixed his gaze on Clara and spoke. "Ma'am, I am going to have you tell me, using your own words, precisely what happened on the night we are discussing. Do not omit a single detail, and do not include anything you are not willing to swear to." So she told him the whole story. Her account was orderly. It followed the sequence of events without a flaw. She spoke with a sharpness that had been honed by 3 entire years of waiting. She had thought about this moment so many times that the words came out smooth and certain, not like someone trying to patch a story together as they went. She knew exactly what she had seen, what she had heard, and who spoke every last word. After she finished, Judge Hartwell made 3 little notes on his paper, looked them over, and said, "The divorce papers can be filed today. Under Colorado territorial law, being abandoned for 3 years is more than enough reason. I will see to the filing myself, and it will be final inside of 30 days. He went on. "And about Jeb, what Mr. Whitlock did last night is criminal trespass, not to mention making threats to destroy property. I'm issuing a warrant for his arrest this very afternoon. The county sheriff from Pueblo is the man who will serve it." He looked at her over the top of his papers. "He will have the choice to leave the Colorado territory on his own before the warrant is served. Some fellas in his spot choose to do that. If he decides to stay, he will be arrested." Then he said, "And Cole Ransom." Hartwell glanced over at Gerald Greer. Gerald spoke right up, telling him Cole had already left the territory 2 days ago. Dunit's boy saw him riding south with all his gear packed. He is not coming back. Clara let that piece of news sink in deep. "All right," she finally said. Hartwell had her sign her name on 4 separate documents. He had Elias and Gerald sign as witnesses, and by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he was back on his horse and gone. Tom Aldis rode south with him, acting as the official witness to make sure the warrant was proper. At the gate, Tom Aldis pulled his horse to a stop and looked back at Clara. "I am mighty sorry I did not get here sooner," he said. "I rode with that bunch for 2 months before I realized what they were truly up to. Once I knew, I should have moved quicker." "You moved," she told him. "That is the part that counts." A determined look hardened his young face. "Good luck to you, Mrs. Whitlock." "It will not be Mrs. Whitlock for much longer," she answered. He gave her a real smile then, the very first one she had ever seen from him. And then he rode on south. The yard grew quiet. Gerald Greer said his goodbyes and started back down the valley. William fetched his bedroll from the barn and left with his father, giving Clara a firm handshake at the gate. She took it just as seriously because the moment deserved it. And then she was alone, on her own land, with her signed papers in the summer sun, and Elias standing quietly by the porch corner. She stood right in the middle of the yard and soaked it all in. The cabin, the roof that had not let in a single drop from any summer storm, the porch that took her weight without a single groan, the chimney that pulled smoke up straight and true, the north wall just 2 days from being fully repaired, and the path to the gate, laid with flat stones that never budged in the rain. It was all hers. It was all safe. She heard the soft scuff of Elias's boots on the porch steps as he came to stand right beside her. Not a step behind, not keeping a polite space between them. Right there, next to her. She did not turn to look at him. "It is done," she said. "The part with the law is," he replied. "The part with the law," she agreed. "The rest of it is going to take longer. Most things that are worth a damn usually do." She turned then to look him square in the eye. There was something she had been holding back for a good while, something she had not said out loud yet. It was not because of fear, but because saying it needed a deep-seated certainty that had taken its time to grow. She felt that certainty now. "When Hannah comes home," she said, "I want her to meet you." He stood there, completely still. "As the man who fixed my roof," she went on, "and the man who found my deed, and the man who told me the truth, even when it came late and was not the whole story," she held his gaze. "And after all that, as whatever else you happen to be by then." The summer afternoon just seemed to pause around them. The high valley was quiet and washed in a golden light, with the mountains making a dark ring around the edge of everything. "Whatever else I am by then," he repeated, his voice low and slow. "That is what I said." He gave one slow nod, the kind of nod a man gives when he is accepting something he has been real cautious about accepting. He was cautious not because he did not want it, but because wanting had brought him nothing but trouble before, and he had learned to not grip it too tight until it proved it was real. "All right," he said. "South fence post," she said. "In the morning," he answered. "In the morning," she agreed. She turned and went back inside. Behind her, she heard him walking toward the north wall. There were still 2 days of work left to do, and he was getting back to it, just like he always got back to things, steady, without any rush, and with his mind right there on the task. She walked to her little writing desk. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. She wrote, "Hannah, all the legal trouble is over. Your room is still here waiting for you. Come home whenever you are ready. Mama." It was short. It was the truth. It was everything that needed saying, and not a word more. She set it by the door for the morning mail. Then she tied on her apron and started making supper. From outside, she could hear the sounds of work going on, the clear ring of a hammer hitting wood, steady and unhurried. And she let that sound be the one the cabin had been missing for so long. It was the sound of something being built, not just mended, but truly and properly built. She put an extra plate on the table without even realizing she was doing it. And when she noticed what she had done, she left it right there. The south fence post was done in a single morning, not the half day he had figured on. Elias never said a word about it. He just started working on the inside frame of the north wall without her asking, and Clara did not say anything about the change in plans. And that was how things were between them now. It was a rhythm they had found without having to talk it out. It was the kind of pace two people find when they are both paying close attention, without needing to explain every little thing. The north wall took the full 2 days he had expected. Clara brought him water in the middle of the morning and again in the middle of the afternoon. He drank it without stopping his work. She would linger just long enough to see how the work was coming along and then head back to her own chores. The third time she came out, she sat herself down on an overturned crate close to the wall and just watched him for a spell, not pretending she was there for any other reason. And he did not pretend that he did not notice her watching. "You want to hand me that brace?" he asked. She passed it to him. "You are going to want to put a coat of paint on this part once it is finished," he said. "It will seal the wood, keep the damp from seeping back into the joint." "I know how to paint a wall," she said. "I know you do," he replied. She handed him the next piece of lumber before he even had to ask for it. He noticed that, too. On the second evening, when the wall was finished and strong, and all the tools were put away neat and tidy, he came to the supper table and sat down. They ate just like they had been eating for weeks. It was not the careful distance they kept in their first few days. It was not two people acting like they were strangers to each other. It was just them, together. It was the way folks eat after they have been through a hard time together, when that hard time is over, but the next part has not yet begun. Clara set down her fork. "I got a letter from the records office today," she said. He looked up. The divorce filing went through the first step. Hartwell rushed it. Gerald reckons he put it right at the top of the pile. She paused. 30 days turns into 15 when a judge decides something needs deciding. 15 days, Elias said, give or take. "And Jeb," she went on. "Gerald heard from the sheriff's office in Pueblo. Jeb was served the warrant 3 days ago. He took the option to leave on his own." She said it flat, the same way she said things that were too big to hang any kind of feeling on. "He is gone from the Colorado Territory. The sheriff's office will keep an eye out for 6 months. Elias was quiet for a second. "How does that sit with you?" he asked. She thought about it honestly, the way she had been thinking about everything lately. She did not give him the quick answer or the polite one, but the real one. Relieved that he is gone. Mad that it took this long. And knowing that neither of those feelings is the whole story. She picked up her fork again. "I spent 11 years with that man, and most of them were bad. but I walked into it with my own 2 feet, and that is a weight I have to carry. You were 23 years old when you married him, Elias said. I was, she replied. That is not an age where a person knows enough to keep from making the wrong kind of choice. She looked straight at him. You sound like you know a thing or two about that. I signed on with a cattle outfit when I was 19 that it turned out was running stolen horses, he said. I was 2 months in before I knew. I left the very day I found out, but it still cost me. He paused for a moment. Being young and not knowing what you are walking into is not some kind of fault in your character. It is just part of being young. She held his gaze. Is that what you tell someone to make them feel better? No, he said. It is what I tell them because it is the truth. I do not say things just to make people feel better. That kind of comfort rarely holds. She knew he was right. She had been sure of it since around the 4th day, right after he told her about the saloon in Trinidad without trying to pretty it up. It was a fact about him that she had stored away without thinking. The same way a person notices things that are solid, things that can hold weight, the kinds of things you can build a life upon. 15 days, she said once more. 15 days, he repeated after her. She returned to eating her supper. He did the same. Through the window, the summer night was settling softly, and a deep quiet filled the valley, the kind it had known since Jeb's men rode away to the south. It was a real peacefulness now, not the tense waiting quiet from before. The stars were spread thick above the high country. From somewhere on the north ridge, an animal called out just once, and then silence fell over the land again. Clara rested her hands flat on the kitchen table and finally said the words she had been struggling with for the past 3 days. I want you to stay. Want. The sentence was simple and direct. It was not decorated with any fine words. There was no back door left open to slip through. She had decided that if she was going to say it, she would say the whole entire truth. Speaking in half-truths had never gotten her anywhere good in life, and she was done with them for good. Elias gently placed his fork on his plate. He did not reply immediately, and she allowed him the silence. She had come to understand that when he was quiet, it meant he was taking the time to give a true answer instead of just a quick one. Clara, he started, I know what you are about to say. She stopped him right there. You are going to tell me that trouble seems to follow you wherever you go. You are going to say that a man with your past is a heavy load for a woman who just managed to sort out her own legal problems. You're going to offer up something that sounds practical and unselfish, like you are just looking out for my best interests, but it is nothing more than an old bad habit with a new look. He just sat there looking at her. Am I wrong? She asked. A moment of silence passed between them. No, he finally answered. Well, in that case, I will tell you the same thing I told Jeb on that porch. She held his gaze steady. I am done making my decisions out of fear. That means I will not be afraid of what it might cost you to stay here, because that is your burden to figure out. And it means I will not be afraid of what it costs me to ask, because that is my own burden. So I am asking. What you choose to do with that is your decision. The supper table was between them with its 2 plates, 2 cups, and the oil lamp that Clara had begun lighting earlier in the evenings, having come to enjoy the extra warmth of its light. I have slept in more places than I can even count, Elias said, ever since I turned 20 years old. I have made my bed in 30 different counties, and not a single time have I woken up in any of them feeling like I was in the place I was supposed to be. He paused for a heartbeat. Until about the 9th day I was here. Clara took a slow breath. Day 9, she repeated softly. The morning after I told you what happened in Trinidad. I woke up in that lean-to, and the morning sun was cutting right through the space between the boards. I could hear you making noise in the kitchen, and I thought... He stopped and then started over. I thought, there it is. And I spent the whole next week trying to tell myself it was not true. And were you? Wrong? No, he said. I was not. She looked straight at him from across the table. Then stay. I will stay, he said. It was not a big, dramatic show, nor was it a loud declaration for all to hear. It was just a man quietly accepting something that was already a fact. It was like how you accept a foundation after it has been fixed proper. You do not celebrate it. You just stand on it and have faith that it will hold you. She stood up and took the plates over to the wash basin. He carried his own cup and came right up beside her, and they washed the dishes together. It was something they had started doing 4 days ago, without a single word spoken about it. They stood side by side in the kitchen, and the lamplight threw their shadows tall on the north wall. That wall was solid now, sealed up and standing straight just like it ought to be. Hannah's letter, Clara said, as she passed him the second plate to dry. What about it? She said she wanted to come for a visit, but she never said when. Letters can take a good while to get where they are going, he said. She is the kind who thinks things through. Clara nodded. She always was. She looks at a problem from every angle before she makes a move. She got that. She stopped for a moment. She did not get that from Jeb. No, he said, his voice soft. She is coming, Clara said. I know she is on her way. I just do not know if that means in 3 weeks or 3 months. Whenever she gets here, he said, that north wall will be solid and the roof will be sound. And there will be somebody here who knows when to give her room and when to stay close by. Clara turned and looked straight at him. He dried the plate with that special kind of focus he gave to everything he did. Complete and steady, as if that one plate deserved all the care in the world. You think about her, Clara said. I think about what it must have cost her to write that letter back, he said. 5 years had passed, and her own mother sends a letter that does not even begin with an apology, and she found herself reading it 4 times in one day. He set the plate on the shelf. That is a daughter who never gave up on wanting to come home. She just had to be certain it was a safe place to return to. Clara was standing perfectly still. I know a thing or two about that, he said, not looking at her, keeping his eyes on the shelf. Wanting to be somewhere, but not being sure if you are welcome. She placed the last cup on the shelf. You are welcome here, she said. He turned around. For a moment, they were just 2 people in a kitchen at the end of a long summer day. The lamp cast a warm glow between them. The mountain was a huge, dark shape outside the window, and everything in that room felt fixed and clean and strong. I am going to go check on the barn, he said. I know, she said. He walked out. She stayed there in her kitchen and let herself feel the true weight of what had just settled into place. It did not happen in a big dramatic fashion, and there was no grand announcement. It happened the way good things sometimes do, quietly with their full weight, landing right where they were always meant to be. She went to bed. She slept without the rifle. She had not even realized the first time she had done it. But she noticed it now, and she lay there with that new truth for a little while. The weight of it, or rather, the absence of weight, the heavy burden she had carried with her every single night for 3 years, was just gone. It felt like the last heavy rock being lifted from a pack she had worn for so long she had forgotten how much it weighed. She let out a long, slow breath. She slept. 14 days later, Hannah came. Clara did not know it was going to happen that morning. She found out the same way she learned about most important things, after it had already happened, by the mark it left. She was working in the garden when she heard a horse on the north track. Not the south track, but the north one, the long way around. She stood up straight with dirt on her hands and her heart beating a strange rhythm in her chest that she would not call panic. Because it was not really panic. It was more like the feeling of a door you have been holding shut for a very long time, finally beginning to swing open on its own. She heard Elias's voice from the yard. It was not loud or worried. It was the special tone a man uses when he has to introduce himself to someone who is not expecting him, but needs to know who he is. She heard the sound of his boots on the stone path. She heard him say, "She is in the garden. I will go let her know you are here." And then he was standing at the garden gate, and his face had the look of a man who knew the exact weight of the next 60 seconds and was treating it with proper respect. "She rode up the north track," he said. "She did not want to come up the south way. She said she remembered the south track from when she was a little girl, and it felt wrong to come back the old way." Clara's hands had begun to tremble again. "How does she look?" she asked. He took a moment to consider. "Tired, wary, like someone who packed a bag for every possible outcome of this meeting." "Is she angry?" "I do not believe so," he said. "She asked me if the roof was the same one as before, and I told her no, it was brand new, and she looked up at it for a long time and just said, 'Good.'" Clara breathed out. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. "I will be over by the north wall. There is nothing wrong with the north wall." "I know," he said. "I will be there all the same." She knew what he was doing. He was making room, not vanishing, not leaving her alone, just moving to a spot that was close enough to help but far enough away to give the next hour what it needed. She took off her gardening apron, wiped her hands on it, and hung it on the gatepost. She walked around the corner of the cabin and into the yard. Hannah Whitlock was standing at the gate to the stone path. She was taller than Clara remembered, and then Clara knew that was not right. Hannah was the exact same height she had been at 16. The thing was, Clara had been carrying the picture of a girl in her mind, and the person standing at the gate was not a girl anymore. She was 21 years old, with her father's strong jaw and her mother's eyes, and a way of holding her shoulders that was all her own. It was the posture of someone who had learned how to stand up straight through hard times, and had gotten so used to it that it now looked completely natural. She stood there, just taking in the porch, seeing that support beam standing straight and true, not leaning like it used to. Her eyes followed the roof line, clean and even now, and then the stone path that wound from the gate to the steps, with not a single stone out of place. Clara waited at the other end of that path. They just looked at each other. 5 years. 5 whole years had passed right there between them, feeling like a long, hard season of rain, like 1,000 miles of bad road, like all the wrong words they had said, and all the right ones they had left unspoken. Hannah was the first to speak. "Y'all fixed the path. The spring rains always used to wash those stones crooked." Clara said, "Someone came and set them right." "The whole thing?" "The whole thing." Hannah glanced down at the path for a second, then her gaze met Clara's again. "Your letter said the roof held up." "It did," Clara said, "through every single storm we had this summer." "The old roof never could do that," Hannah said. "No," Clara agreed. "It surely could not." A little muscle twitched in Hannah's jaw. Something was churning deep behind her eyes. It was not quite anger, but a close cousin to it. The kind of feeling that lives right next door to anger and sometimes gets mistaken for it, which is just plain grief. "I used to lie awake in my room and just listen to it," she said. "The sound of the leak. I used to think if I could just fix that one roof, everything else might turn out different." "I thought the very same thing," Clara said. "You did?" "For years." Hannah looked down at that stone path one more time, then met her mother's eyes. "Is it different?" Clara thought about the rifle she no longer kept close by, the knife she no longer wore on her belt, the extra plate set at the supper table for weeks now without a word said about it, the north wall standing solid and sealed up tight, the signed papers tucked away in the drawer with her name written on them, her name and hers alone, the name she had before and the name she would have from this day forward. "Yes," she said, "it is." Hannah swallowed, and it looked like it took some effort. "Mama," she said, "just that one word." But the way she said it, with all 5 of those years packed inside, all the leavin' and the missin' and the not knowing how to ever come back home, it unknotted something in Clara's chest that had been pulled tight ever since the morning Hannah rode east with her aunt and did not look back. Not even once. Clara started walking up the stone path. Hannah started walking down it. They met smack dab in the middle. It was not a graceful thing, and neither one of them was gentle about it. They were just two people closing a gap that had been too long and too wide for far too long, and was now finally small enough to cross. They just held on to each other right there in the middle of the path. Neither one of them said, "I am sorry." They did not need to. The path was solid beneath their feet. That said it a whole lot better than either of them ever could. From the north wall, the sound of a hammer went quiet. It did not stop because the job was finished. It stopped because a man who understood the weight of moments like these also understood that this one did not need anybody watching. Elias set his hammer down and just let the valley be still for a little while. And in that stillness, the two women stood on the stone path and held on to each other, letting 5 years of hurt feel smaller than the 12 feet of distance it had once been. After a time, they went on inside. Clara put on a pot of coffee. Hannah sat down at the table, the very same one, in the very same chair she used as a little girl, and she ran her hand across the old wood. It was the way you touch something you figured you would never see again. "Who fixed the north wall?" she asked. "Elias, the man out in the yard." "Yes." He introduced himself like he belonged here. Clara set 2 cups on the table. "He does." Hannah looked at her, not with judgment, but with a sharp focus. The kind of keen attention a daughter gives when she is trying to piece together a story she has not been told. "Is he the one who fixed all this, or most of it? Did he—" Hannah started, then stopped, and found different words. "Is he good to you?" That one question held 21 years of hard living, 5 years of silence, and every last lonely night Clara had spent in this house after Jeb was gone. Hannah looked her mother square in the eye for a long moment, reading her the way only daughters can, searching past the words for the truth behind them. She must have found what she was looking for. "Okay," she said, nodding her head slow. "Okay, then." Hannah wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I want to hear the whole story from the very beginning." So Clara told her. She told her about the knock on the door that came right at noon, about the man who knelt down in the dirt instead of crossing her threshold without an invitation. She explained about the deed, the terrible debt to the Halversons, and the 2 long years she went on without even knowing she was a free woman. She told her about Tom Aldis standing on her porch, about Cole Ransom skulking at the edge of the woods, and about climbing out the back window in the dead of night and finding Elias on the west track. She told the story just the way that summer had happened, moving fast in some parts and dragging on forever in others. The full weight of it all landed right where it ought to. Hannah listened without saying a single word, just like she used to, taking it all in, sorting it through, and giving it room to settle before she spoke. When Clara finally got to the end, Hannah sat there quietly for a good long while. Then she said, "You went out the back window." "I sure did, with a rifle in my hands." "In the dark?" Clara nodded. "It was either that, or I could wait for them to burn the house down with me in it." A new kind of understanding washed over Hannah's face. "You were not like that before," she said softly. "No," Clara said. "I surely was not." "What changed you?" Clara thought on it for a second. "I reckon I got angry instead of getting scared," she said. "And I stopped being all by myself." Hannah turned her coffee cup round and round in her hands. "I thought about coming back," she said. "A whole lot of times. I just did not know what I would be coming back to. I know. I was afraid it would be just the same as it was. The leaking and the waiting and the way the house felt." She trailed off, like it was always just about to cave in on us. "It was," Clara said, "but it is not anymore." Hannah looked up at the ceiling, then at the wall, and over to the window that did not have a smoke stain on it anymore. "No," she said, "it sure is not." They sat with that feeling for a minute. Outside, the sound of a hammer started up again, steady and sure. It was the sound of work that never ends, because there is always a task needing to be done, and doing it properly is what counts. Hannah cocked her head, listening. What in the world is he working on now? Ain't nothing wrong, Clara said. He just works. He goes looking for things to fix. Now, that is a fine quality in a man, Hannah remarked. It surely is, Clara agreed. They sat and sipped their coffee. In a little while, Hannah got up, walked over to the door, and pushed it open. She gazed out at the yard, at the stone path, and at the man focused on the north wall with the kind of intense concentration a person gets when they believe every job matters. Mr. Mercer, she called. Elias looked up. Coffee's ready, Hannah said, offering a small smile. Would you like a cup? His gaze met hers, then shifted to Clara, who was propped against the kitchen doorframe, just taking it all in. Yes, ma'am, he answered, his voice low. I'd appreciate that. He came up onto the porch. He stopped right at the doorway, the same way he did on that very first day, waiting for her to ask him in, not bold enough to step across the line himself. But it was different this time. Hannah moved aside and held the screen door open wide for him. And this time, he was not some stranger slipping into another person's house. He was coming home. He took a seat at the table and Hannah poured him a cup before settling back into her own chair. Clara stayed by the counter. For a good long while, not a single one of them spoke a word. The kitchen simply held the three of them in the warm summer light shining through the clean window. The north walls were strong, the roof was solid, and every single thing underneath it felt just the way it was supposed to. Then Hannah looked over at Elias and said, Mama tells me you looked up her property deed. I did, he confirmed. He had done it long before she even knew she ought to ask, before she even realized there was a question that needed asking. Hannah looked at him with her mother's eyes, but she sized him up in a way that was all her own. Why? She asked him. Because it needed doing, he said, plain and simple. And I was here. Well, that about covers it. Hannah studied him for another moment. Then she glanced over at her mother. An entire conversation passed between them in that single look, that quiet understanding that mothers and daughters have when they can read each other's hearts. Clara gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. Hannah turned her attention back to Elias. Can you teach me how to reset a fence post? She asked. That one on the east end of the paddock has been leaning since I was 12 years old, and no one ever got around to fixing it. The corner of Elias's mouth pulled into a slight smile. After we have our coffee, he said. After we have our coffee, she agreed. Clara turned back toward the counter. Her hands were perfectly steady. Her heart was filled with something that was not exactly happiness, because happiness always felt like a thing that could disappear in a puff of smoke. And this was not that kind of thing. This was solid, like a foundation that could handle a heavy weight, the kind of thing that weathers summer thunderstorms and winter freezes and the simple, steady march of time. It was the feeling of a foundation that had been put to the test and had not budged and would not budge. She thought about a man kneeling in the dust of her yard on that first day, holding his hat in both hands, saying, I have not been welcome anywhere for 3 years. She thought about Hannah standing at the gate, looking down the stone path. She thought about 15 days of back-breaking work and a signature on a document that meant her name was finally truly her own. She thought about what Elias had told them at the dinner table. I have gone to sleep in 30 different counties, and I have not once woken up feeling like I was where I was meant to be, until about the 9th day I spent right here. She thought about the 3rd chair she had set at the table weeks ago without a word, and the 4th one that was going to be needed now. Neither addition had to be announced or explained. They just had to be done, the same way everything that truly mattered had to be done. Quietly, without a big fuss. One day after another. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to stand in the doorway. Out on the stone path, Hannah was already firing off questions, and Elias was answering every one. He was walking with her toward the paddock, telling her how the soil works and how deep a post needs to be set. He explained how the frost can heave the ground up in the winter if you do not set your anchors just so. Hannah was nodding right along, listening with the kind of focus that meant she planned on remembering and using every last word she heard. Clara stood there in the doorway of her own cabin. Her property deed, her daughter, and her man. He was walking on that stone path with his hat clutched in his hand, just like he always did when he was not working. He treated every bit of ground he walked on with a deep and careful respect. The summer valley stretched out all around their land, with the ridge, the tall prairie grass, and the mountains standing like dark guardians along the edge of the world. High above them, the late August sky was a deep, unbelievable blue that you can only ever find way up in the high country. It was the kind of blue that made you feel tiny but also made you know exactly where you belonged. Small in a good way. It meant you were just one part of something much, much bigger than yourself, but you were rooted deep in the piece of it that was all yours. The roof above was strong. The path below was solid. And the woman in the doorway of the house she had poured her own life into had finally made it all the way home. It was the place she had been walking toward for 11 years, then 3 more, and 14 days, all of it starting with a single knock on her door in the bright midday sun. This was bigger than safety, bigger than ownership, bigger than a life lived without looking over your shoulder. This was home, the real kind. The kind with a roof that does not leak. The kind you earn by planting your feet when it would have been a whole lot simpler to leave. You get it by mending what is broken instead of just turning your back on the mess. You get it by letting the right people in and trusting them to step gently when they cross your threshold. Clara May Whitlock stood in her doorway and watched her daughter learn how to set a fence post. The teacher was a man who had knelt in her own dirt just 3 weeks before, needing a place to feel finally and truly and completely welcome. And she knew that this very moment was what the entire summer had been working toward. It was not about the mended roof or the clear deed or even the official papers with only her name on them. It was this right here, this. 3 people on a stone path on a late morning in August, with the mountains watching over them, the work continuing on, and the foundation holding everything up. A house becomes a home on the day that someone strong enough to walk away proves they are even stronger by making the choice to stay. And on this morning in this valley, in the high summer country of the Colorado Territory, in the year 1876, everyone who mattered had stayed. That was enough. That was everything.